In this video, I'm going to show you how to do the chalkboard technique. This is a technique that is really easy and can be used on any type of card for any occasion, any time of year. For this first tag, we're only going to use a few supplies. We have a 2.5-inch punch, some stamps and some white craft ink, and some black cardstock. I'm going to take the stamps and make sure that I ink them up really well with the white craft ink, and sometimes you do have to kind of rub the stamp on the pad a little bit. Looks like I got a little red on my stamp pad at some point, but anyway, rub it a little bit and make sure your stamp is nice and inky, and then go directly to the cardstock and stamp it down. As you can see, you can clearly see the white ink on the black cardstock. I'm now going to take the 2.5-inch circle punch and punch out the tag. I'm going to add some snowflakes to the tag with the same white craft ink and just scatter them around without without really trying to even it out or anything, just a little scattering of snowflakes around the edge. And then to add a little bit of more of a chalkboard look, I'm going to rub where I can see that there's a little bit more ink. And then to give it a little bit more of a chalkboard effect, I'm going to take the sponge dauber and just apply some paint around the edges of the circle. I'm also going to add a little bit of ink to the center of the tag, just a little bit, whatever's left over from inking around the edge, and smudge it a little bit with my finger, and it just makes it look a little bit more snowy and like there's leftover chalk dust on the board. I'm going to finish the tag off with some white baker's twine and some gold trim. I'm going to cut them the same length and just loop it through the tag. And that finishes this quick and easy chalkboard tag. For the next tag, I have cut out the two largest tags from the Tags and Labels frameless dies. I have cut out the larger one out of black cardstock and the smaller one out of just some scratch paper. I'm going to show you how to make a border around the larger tag. I'm placing the smaller one on top of the larger one, and they nest perfectly. And then I'm just going to rub the paint along the edge of the black cardstock. I don't have to worry about being too neat because it's supposed to be a little bit messy looking, so I'm just very quickly going around the edge. As you can see, that makes a perfect chalk border. And now I'm going to ink my stamp really well, and this one says "From Santa." And you'll see that on the opposite side of my block I have "Ho Ho Ho" on a different stamp, and I don't really want to stamp it as it is, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ink a third of that stamp and then stamp it 3 times around the top of the tag. And I think I'm inking the lower part of the H that's next to that, so that's why there's a little dot there, but I'm really not worried about it because this is, a very forgiving way of stamping. It's supposed to be a little bit messy looking anyway. To finish the tag, I'm just using a little bit of cherry cobbler twine, and that's tag number 2. I'm going to step things up for this third tag. I'm using the second largest tag from the Tags and Labels frameless set, and I'm going to use this leaf stamp from the For All Things stamp set. And I'm going to stamp it in white first and then in garden green on top. And then I'm going to take the sentiment, stamp it in Versamark ink, and emboss it with gold embossing powder. I've already prepared my Stamp-A-Majig plastic sheet with the stamp so that I can place it perfectly on top of the initial image. So I'm going to ink up my rubber stamp with the craft ink. And rubber stamps tend to do a little bit better with the craft ink than the photopolymer ones do, but as you've seen, the photopolymer ones work well also. So here I'm stamping the image in white, and it needs to dry a little bit because this is a pigment ink. It takes a little while to dry. So in the meantime, I'm going to use my embossing buddy to prep the bottom of my tag, and I'm not going to touch the part that has the craft ink. And I'm also going to be really careful that my embossing powder does not get on the part that I stamped with the craft ink, because since it's still wet, it will the powder will stick to it, and I really don't want any gold on the leaves. So I'm stamping in the Versamark and applying my gold embossing powder, and then I'm going to go heat set the sentiment. Now that my sentiment is embossed in gold and my leaves are dry, I'm going to secure my tag to my work surface with a little piece of removable tape, and I'm going to stamp over the white leaves with the garden green ink. I have my Stamp-A-Majig plastic sheet ready to go, and I have thoroughly cleaned my stamp. I definitely don't want any of that craft ink on my garden green ink pad. So I'm placing my Stamp-A-Majig, and I'm placing the image so that it's a little bit offset so that I can still see a little bit of the white around the green. I'm going to give the tag a little bit more time to dry since I'm stamping the garden green on a non-porous surface, and then I will add some twine or ribbon. For the fourth tag, I'm starting out with a 2" by 3 1/4" piece of black cardstock, and I'm using stamps from the Festival of Trees stamp set. Again, I'm inking up my stamp really well. My stamps have a lot of solid surface, so I want to make sure that they're really inked up well, and I'm pressing firmly a little bit off to the right side of the tag. I want the ink to be nice and dry before I proceed, so I'm going to hit it with my embossing tool and make sure the ink is really dry. My ink is now dry, and I have already prepped my cardstock with my embossing buddy. So I am inking up my sentiment with Versamark ink, and I'm applying embossing powder, and then I'm going to use my heat tool again to emboss the sentiment. I'm using the ornate tag topper at the top of the punch, and then I'm going to add some sparkle. I'm using some Cherry Cobbler Dazzling Details, and the trick to getting nice little dots on the tree is not to hold the bottle sideways, but to hold it straight up, and then you just kind of tap the tip onto the paper and then lift the bottle straight up. Unfortunately, in the video you can't really appreciate how sparkly the dazzling details are in this color, but in person it really does look glittery. I'm also going to use my Stampin' Chalk marker to add a little bit of snow to the tag, and I think I got a little carried away. I think I would have liked it a little bit better with a little less snow, but that's okay, we'll just go with it. My dazzling details are now dry, and I took the sponge dauber that I used earlier and added a little bit of inking around the edges of the tag, and I'm taking some twine and 3 strands of metallic thread and finishing up the tag with that. So tag number 4 is finished. I hope you're still with me for tag number 5. I have 2 pieces of cardstock, black and real red. I'm going to prep both pieces with my embossing buddy since I'm going to be embossing the sentiment on both pieces of cardstock. This time I'm not going to use Versamark ink. I'm just going to use the same white craft ink, and since it's a pigment ink, it will hold the embossing powder just like the Versamark ink did. My sentiments are now embossed, so I'm going to use this 2 3/8 scallop circle punch to punch out the tag, and then I'm going to just use some scissors to trim out the wishing you part of the sentiment. I'm now going to take this little banner and I'm going to apply some dimensionals to the back. I've cut the dimensionals in half so that they wouldn't peek out, and I'm just going to stick this right on top of the other wishing you on the tag. I'm going to make the hole for my ribbon to fit through, and I'm also going to do like in the previous tags and take my sponge dauber and add a little bit of inking, not painting or paint, around the edge of the tag. I'm also going to add a little bit of ink on the tag itself and rub my finger over it just to kind of blend it out a little bit. I'm using some real red ribbon from the holiday catalog, and if you are really observant you may have noticed that I have my sentiment stamped on the back of the cardstock. So I'm cutting out another scallop circle, and I'm going to glue the two of them together with the two-way glue pen. I repunched the hole, and now I'm really putting the ribbon on the tag, and the tag is finished. So that's all 5 tags. Here's a look at all the tags together. You could of course add even more embellishment such as holly leaves or little jingle bells or some more ribbon. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and that you will try this technique. For more pictures and information on the products used, please visit my blog at mawilliams.stampinup.net/blog.